Hello and welcome back. What we're getting ready to dive into now is a tool that I've used for a lot of years, and it's kind of one of my go-to staple tools, especially when we're doing web app pen testing. And that tool is Burp Suite, as you can see it on my screen here. So I intentionally picked to use or chose to use the community edition here. I didn't want to use the pro version for the simple fact that I wanted you to see that you can use this proxy part of Burp without actually having the paid for version of it. So you can literally follow along with this demo or go into our cyber range where we'll have some exercises that you can work through as well on this. But basically, one of the first things and one of the things that challenges people the most about Burp is getting it set up properly. So I just want to walk through some of the settings here. You want to make sure that you have imported the Burp certificate, and you can get that from the Burp Suite website, because that certificate is essentially going to ensure that you can do SSL proxying and interact with SSL. So you'll want to make sure you do that in the process. The other setting is in Burp. When you get it fired up on the dashboard, you go to Proxy. You want to make sure that you've got your proxy set to, for example, in this case, I've got it set to 127.0.0.1 and then port 8080. Now you can set your stuff to whatever you want. You just need to make sure that what you have it set to in Burp here matches what you set it to in your browser. Okay, so I'm going to now go out to my browser. In this case, we're using Firefox, and I will change in the preferences that setting. So let's get this up here. So I'm going to go to preferences, and whatever browser you're using, you would set this in there. And then in Firefox, I'm going to go to settings, under network settings, and then where it shows proxy, currently it's set to not use one. I'm going to pick manual proxy configuration. And then in here, I'm going to put the same thing that I put into Burp, 127.0.0.1, which is your loopback. And then the port I'm going to set is 8080. Again, making it match exactly what's in Burp. All right, so when I do OK to that, what this does essentially is when you think about how you communicate with web servers from your browser, and let me just go into my Microsoft Paint kingdom here and kind of illustrate this to you. So what happens is when you go into and when you visit a website with your browser, what you're actually doing is you have your browser on this side, and then you have your web server on this side. Right? When you visit, you imagine it as just a one-to-one session where your browser is hitting a web server, and then as a result of that, you're pulling some information back down from that web server, or you're pushing information up. That's in large how it works. What Burp Suite is basically you taking and putting something in between like this. So Burp kind of lives like right here. And what that means is now anytime you send something out of your browser to a website, it has to go through Burp first. Anytime something comes back from the web server to your browser session, it has to come back through Burp. And what you're doing, you're able to sit in here and manipulate this traffic as it goes out and manipulate it as it comes back in. And when most web applications and server applications were developed, they were not developed with the thought in mind that someone would be able to do something like this, or someone would even think of doing something like that. The assumption is when you make that request or when you package that, whatever it is from the browser, it's never going to be manipulated again until it gets to the server. And when the server sends something back, it's going to be blindly taken as is by the browser and accepted. And 99% of the time that's true. But we're hackers, we're pen testers, we don't do what normal people do. And this is why Burp was created. So with that proxy function, we can not only see this stuff before it comes into the browser and see the stuff before it goes out, but we can pause and manipulate it. And that is where the real power of the proxy part of Burp actually works. So let's go ahead and look at it. go back to our machine here. So we've got our settings set on the browser. Let's test this. We're going to go and visit this machine that we got over here. And it's going to be the same one if you watched any of my earlier sessions where we actually worked with this particular site and we were doing things here. One of the things that you noticed is that we were interacting with this and doing cross-site scripting on it. And part of why we were able to is because the security settings basically allowed us to do that. So one of the things that we're able to do, or that we can do, let's just log back in here. Is we have the ability to manipulate that in the panel here, because this is a tool that's really designed to allow you to practice with this, right? So I'm going to reset this application, show you what that looks like. We're able to go over here and do that, and it resets it back to default settings. All right, so now I'm going to log out and log back in. And what you find out is the security of this is set to high, right? So if I were to go and try to do the cross-site scripting stuff that we did earlier, watch what happens. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to try to put a message and try to do an iframe source like this. And we'll just do hack.com or yahoo.com. Right? Well, when we try to submit that comment or sign that guest book like we did earlier, you can see that this happens. But if we set the security, we can actually set it to where it blocks those types of things. Right? So now if we go back and look at that and we go in and we put in an iframe, notice how this time it actually took it and it, instead of putting in the iframe tags that I put in, it replaced that with these weird characters. Well, that's HTML encoding. And what that is it's a defense mechanism to take any script tags or any HTML or JavaScript or anything that you try to put in there to make it dangerous or to cause some action. It takes that and converts it into regular old harmless HTML so that you can't post these types of attacks. That is controlled on the client side. In other words, when you interacted with that server, the server created a token or a cookie that then was pushed down to your browser that says, hey, this person does not have the ability to do A, B, and C. In other words, it set your security to high or impossible, which means you can't post these types of things. So watch what we can do with Burp. Since I've got my browser going through Burp, I'm going to go ahead and tell Burp to intercept. So I'm going to turn intercept on. All right, we're going to revisit this site. Now, when I say let's go back and revisit it, notice it pops me back into Burp, because see how the browser is just spinning there? It's not actually loading the site. That's because Burp has done its job and paused that request right here. Now, I can see the token that actually sets a security. I can simply change that from impossible to low. And usually Burp will auto-identify cookies for you because they'll be red. These are things that are usually changeable. I go ahead and forward that request. All right, now I go back and try to do this again. So I'm going to go to stored, cross-site scripting, and guess what? When I made that request, it reset the security back to impossible. So I'm going to have to keep changing that for every part of this browser request. Back to low. going to go forward again. Now I'm going to post my comment. I'm going to try to do an iframe again. We'll use yahoo.com to be consistent. So now I go ahead and hit sign the guest book, and guess what? It brings me back up in the Burp. And here's that cookie. It's again set to impossible. So I need to keep consistently changing it to low. I forward that request. And now, because I kept changing that cookie, when we go look at what was posted, I was able to successfully get that iframe in there now. So when you visit a site and the site's prohibiting you or keeping you from doing things, a lot of times that control is a client-side control. And what we mean by that is what you just saw is it's setting the security on the server side, but it's pushing that enforcement down to the browser via a session token or a cookie. And in this case, we're able to identify that cookie and then manipulate it and change it to say whatever we want it. Now, if I were to do something, let's visit another site. Let's go to, for example, bestbuy.com. I think all of us in technology and IT probably visit Best Buy quite frequently. So let's just look at a few things there. So I'm going to forward this, and Best Buy is a much bigger site. So there's a lot more traffic and a lot more things we have to look at. And let's, it's because we didn't put the cookie in here, the certificate in here for Burp yet. So we're going to tell it to go ahead and let us visit anyways. So we forward. And we're going to have to keep accepting it and forwarding. And one thing I want to point out, especially if you've been with me throughout this entire session for this course, is notice how Firefox is saying man in the middle detected. It knows that we've got burp sitting in between, right? So it's like we're man in the middling ourselves, and we know it's okay, but you can see the browser's trying to protect us, saying, hey, don't know if you notice or not, but you're being man in the middle. And we're okay with that because we're actually doing it, which is why we're just keep accepting it and forwarding it on. And I'm just going to do this, turn the intercept off temporarily so we can just accept this and go ahead. All right, and we get the Best Buy site. Now it just popped up something that asked me if I wanted to allow location access. That's because it's asking for permission to get a cookie to come in, ask my machine where you are, what's your location, and it's going to take that location information and track it. How that's used is, for example, if I were to go and say I wanted to buy something and pick it up at a store, it would auto be able to show me which stores are close to me because I just accepted that cookie that's going to get my location so that it can tell me which store is closest to me. So you can see all that if we turn the intercept back on here. All right, look at the cookies that pop up. So you can see there's a security identifier, there's a specific type of cookie here, and most of these in this particular request are either in base 64 encoding or in hex, but you could always decode these. For example, you might take some of the base 64 stuff here. You could, for example, right click it. Like a section of it like that. Send it to what's called a decoder in Burp. We go to the decoder tab and it's got that string in there. Since we know it's base 64, we can say decode is base 64. And you could see the ASCII translation of it, which in this case looked like that. right? So you can take these things and manipulate them and find other things in the session, and you can see other interesting cookies in here as you go through. So one of the things that I encourage you to do, ask someone that's learning how to use this, check out the sites that you visit frequently already, and then go and look and see the things that are being tracked and the things that are being pushed down. Now I want you to notice in this cookie, this big red cookie here, notice it's got a customer zip code. That's 9001. Okay, so again, it's tracking all this stuff in real time. Now, what zip code is 9001? I don't know, but it's tracking that. It's putting it in there. I may or may not be in that zip code right now or close to it. But if we keep looking here, it actually tells us all the things that are tracked. And what's interesting, or what you want to find that's interesting, is if you start manipulating these things, all right? And not even just the cookies. Some interesting stuff that I've seen happen is sometimes I'll go up here, see where it says user agent, and it says that my browser is Mozilla Firefox. I'll come up here sometimes and take that, where it's telling the server what my browser is, and I'll just do this with it. I'll put in like 100 X's, just like that. And then I'll go ahead and forward that. What you find out a lot of times, if you keep changing that and making your browser be 10 X's or 100 X's or some numbers or something like that, what ends up happening is the web server doesn't know what to serve you out because you've given it a browser that it doesn't understand, and you end up seeing versions of the page that you may not be able to see otherwise. And oftentimes there's information in there that you see that you shouldn't be able to see. So that's some of the fun stuff you can do with the Burp Proxy as you get comfortable with it. So definitely I encourage you to play with it. Think about the thing that we did in the beginning where we changed the security settings on that site to allow us to do things that we shouldn't be able to do. In this case, to go ahead and propagate and do that watering hole attack that we were able to do earlier, even when there may be some security controls put on the site to prevent it. We can see how we can use the proxy and burp to get around stuff like that. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this, and look forward to seeing you in the next session.